Imagine living in a time when a single month of the year was seen as a dark omen, surrounded by macabre rituals, bad luck days, and funeral ceremonies. For the Romans, February was exactly that, a feared period associated with death, scarcity, and superstitious beliefs that shaped the culture of one of the most powerful empires in history. But why did the Romans fear this month so much? What made February be treated with such disdain? The answer involves sacrifices, political disputes, and a calendar reorganization that even altered the way we count our days today. In this video, we're going to dive into the dark history of February and uncover the mysteries that turned this month into the most hated one in the Roman calendar. But before we plunge headfirst into this story, full of twists and curiosities, make sure you're already subscribed to our channel and take the opportunity to ring the bell. That way, you won't miss any of our videos about ancient Rome and its amazing stories. The historical context and the origin of the calendar. Get ready to travel back in time and discover how the first Romans defined their days and months, and why February emerged as a loose piece in this massive chronological puzzle. In the early period of Roman civilization, the calendar was a direct reflection of agricultural activities and religious festivities. There were only 10 months, starting in March and ending in December, which showed a strong connection with the harvest cycles. This simple yet incomplete organization was subject to revisions to adapt to the realities of the countryside and the growth of Rome as a city-state. It is in this scenario that Numa Pompilius appears, the second king of Rome. After Romulus founded the city, it was up to Numa to establish religious and civic structures so that society could flourish. He believed that the calendar needed to encompass the entire solar cycle, although it was strongly tied to religious festivities. As a result, he added January and February at the end of the year, trying to align the Roman cycle more harmoniously with the seasons. However, the way February was positioned and the number of days it received created a peculiarity. While most months had an odd number of days, seen as auspicious, February ended up with an even number, reinforcing the idea that it was not a complete period in the eyes of many Romans. This negative reputation only grew over time. The superstition of even numbers. Want to know how the belief in numbers affected daily life in Rome? Get ready to be amazed by the depth of these superstitions. In Roman culture, odd numbers were associated with divine protection. It was believed that these quantities were indivisible, representing the idea of completeness. On the other hand, even numbers had that division in half, bringing the concept of imperfection or openness to bad influences. In a world full of rituals and auguries, every detail referencing the supernatural was taken very seriously. For many Roman citizens, the mere fact that February had an even number of days already placed the month under a shadow of misfortune. In a time when religion and superstition went hand in hand, nothing went unnoticed. It was common for families to perform extra small rituals at the onset of February, seeking to minimize the effects of this period considered more vulnerable. However, it's worth noting that these beliefs did not emerge from nothing. From its earliest days, Rome cultivated a deep relationship with signs and omens. The priests, responsible for interpreting the flight of birds or the position of sacrificed animals' entrails, pointed to even numbers as deserving of greater caution. And February, with its numerical stigma, did not escape this rule. Have you ever wondered how this kind of superstition shaped the destiny of an empire? Leave your like now so we can continue bringing you such impactful stories. The reasons for the end of the year in February. After understanding the peculiarity of even numbers, let's see why February was marked as the symbolic end of the year, carrying purification rites and a certain air of melancholy. Before Julius Caesar's major reforms, The Roman calendar could be described as a constantly changing mosaic. When February appeared at the end of the year, it not only symbolized the transition from one period to another, but also the closing of ritual and spiritual obligations. Thus, the month brought together practices aimed at purifying the Roman people and atoning for mistakes made in previous months. Historians believe that the name Februarius derives from februar, a term related to objects and rites of purification. The period was filled with solemn festivals connected to spiritual cleansing and even psychological preparation for the start of the new cycle, which, at that stage, would begin in March. By carrying this burden of expiation and purification, February became considered a month of reflection, while January was seen as the doorway to the future because of Janus, the god of passages. February remained in the past, settling pending affairs. This sense of getting rid of impurities contributed to the month's somber reputation. Julius Caesar's reform. Curious to know how a brilliant general and statesman redefined time in Rome? Come find out how Julius Caesar remodeled the calendar and, in doing so, changed February's reputation. Julius Caesar, in his quest for organization, and to demonstrate his power over Rome, instructed astronomers and mathematicians to update the archaic calendar, resulting in the Julian calendar. The goal was to align the months with the solar cycle, correcting discrepancies that gradually shifted the seasons over the years. When Caesar implemented the Julian calendar in 46 BC, February became the second month of the year. At least in theory, this change should have lessened the symbolic burden of closure that the month carried. However, its historical wounds did not heal that easily. Many traditions remained, and people still regarded February as something bothersome, since it continued to have fewer days than the other months. The adoption of the leap year, which included an extra day in February every 4 years, was another important modification. Caesar believed it would help correct the annual accumulation of hours. Yet in the first few years, applying this change was confusing, reinforcing the idea that February was an irregular or incomplete month. If you're enjoying these stories about the organization of Rome, comment below what intrigues you the most about this period of antiquity. Augustus's ambition. Want to understand how Caesar's heir, who would become the first Roman emperor, left his mark up to the present day? Get ready to learn about the move that took even more prestige away from February. After Julius Caesar's assassination, Augustus, then known as Octavian, took over as the general's political heir. Young, slender in appearance, and with a determined gaze, he had to overcome many enemies before consolidating his power. When he finally became the top figure in Rome, he began to imprint his style on practically every sphere of life, including the calendar. One symbol of his glory was renaming the month of Sextilis to August in his own honor. But there was one inconvenient detail. July, named in tribute to Julius Caesar, had 31 days, while August had 30. Augustus refused to be outdone by his predecessor and added a day to his month in his honor, taking it from February. If February was already plagued by the reputation of being even-numbered, incomplete, and full of dark rituals, losing yet another day only reinforced popular displeasure toward it. Thus the month became even shorter, and the ugly duckling reputation of the calendar persisted. The political brilliance of Augustus, therefore, had consequences that reached even the way we count our days today. Funeral rites and the connection with death. If you think everything we've said so far is intense, wait until you hear about the rituals that plunged February into an atmosphere of mourning and reverence for the dead. In addition to being a short month marked by even numbers, February also concentrated festivities dedicated to the deceased, such as Feralia and Parentalia. These ceremonies honored ancestors, making the period especially focused on remembering the dead. Streets and homes grew quieter, and offerings were left in tombs and sacred places. These funeral rites reinforced February's image as a dark month. It was a time when families gathered to remember those who had passed on, asking for spiritual protection and purification before the new harvests began in March. For many, it was a phase of introspection, a real deep dive into their own family history. Even though it was essential to Roman society, which greatly valued the worship of ancestors, this focus on the dead left many Romans uncomfortable. Mysticism, mourning, and the reminder of human finitude painted a picture that contrasted with the grandeur and pride typical of Rome, the city that aspired to conquer the world. If these funeral traditions have piqued your interest, leave your like and share this video with someone who also loves ancient history. Lupercalia, a wild festival. Amid so many mourning ceremonies, a festival full of chaos and animal energy emerged, ready for the sight of naked priests running through the streets of Rome. Lupercalia was an annual festival that took place in mid-February, focused on purification and fertility. Priests called Luperci would sacrifice goats and dogs, then run through the Roman streets almost naked, lightly striking those they encountered. It was believed that this contact purified and brought good luck, especially for women who desired children. In contrast to the mourning ceremonies, Lupercalia seemed like an explosion of raw life and primordial energies. For more conservative Romans, it was a reminder of Rome's rustic roots, predating imperial sophistication. For others, the festival was uncomfortable, something almost barbaric that remained in the calendar out of tradition. Over time, Lupercalia clashed with the Christian values spreading throughout the empire. Even so, many leaders resisted abolishing it, believing that doing so would bring misfortune. The celebration persisted until, finally, the church managed to weaken and ban the practice, replacing it with Christian rituals. The clash with Christianity. After learning about Lupercalia, find out how the rise of Christianity dealt with the traditions of February, creating conflicts and redefining rituals that would be crucial in the centuries to come. With the end of persecutions against Christians, the church began seeking an accommodation with pagan festivals, replacing symbols and dates with new religious celebrations. However, February was laden with traditions such as funeral ceremonies and Lupercalia itself, which were difficult to suppress. Pope Gelasius tried, at the end of the 5th century, to completely abolish Lupercalia. It wasn't easy. The Roman Senate considered the festival essential for the city's safety and good fortune. The Pope went as far as to mockingly suggest that the senators themselves run naked if they truly believed in the festival's protective power. Little by little, February was being Christianized, losing its pagan atmosphere and making room for new rituals, such as the veneration of saints and periods of penance. Still, the reputation of a burdened month did not disappear altogether. In many Christian regions, it remained a time of reflection, prayer, and spiritual renewals. Were you surprised by the clash between ancient Roman traditions and Christianity? Comment below what you think of this transition of rituals and leave your like to support our channel. The harsh reality of the countryside in February. Ready to see the practical side of this whole story? Discover how rural life influenced the negative view of February, revealing the daily struggle of farmers and workers, while the city lived amid festivities, superstitions, and political disputes. The Roman countryside followed its own peculiar rhythm. February was still a cold month with scarce harvests, a time to prepare for sowing in March. Families often had already consumed much of their stockpiles and anxiously awaited the first signs of spring. During this period, tasks such as pruning vineyards, clearing land, and preparing the soil were exhausting and crucial to ensure a good harvest. With the climate still cold and damp, each day in the field could feel like a battle against the forces of nature. This scenario reinforced the notion of sacrifice and hard work associated with the month. Writers like Varro and Columella emphasized in their agricultural treatises the importance of good planning during this period, as any oversight in February could jeopardize the entire agricultural cycle of the year. Thus, the month was both a time of deprivation and hope, a fragile balance that left a deep mark on the lives of the Romans. The meaning of February today. Want to understand how all this historical heritage influences the way we see February nowadays? It's time to conclude our journey and reflect on the legacy of this misunderstood month. After so many twists and disputes, February remains the shortest month in the Western calendar, heir to the decisions of Numa, Caesar, and Augustus. Even though few people today associate February with death rituals or bizarre sacrifices, its history still carries the impression of a transitional month. Each leap year, when we have that extra day, the memories of this irregularity and ancient superstitions resurface subtly. Even if we are no longer as superstitious as the ancient Romans, we can notice the symbolism of something that is always changing, always adjusting to corrections of time. Perhaps the greatest legacy of February is precisely this: the lesson that time is not something fixed and unchangeable. It is the result of political decisions, cultural conventions, and deep-seated beliefs that go beyond simple counting of days. Thus, by understanding the complexity of February, we can also understand a bit more about the Roman spirit itself. And so we come to the end of this long journey through the most controversial month of the Roman calendar. From Numa Pompilius to Augustus, from funeral rites to Lupercalia, we've seen how each element shaped the complex image of February. We hope you've discovered curiosities, felt moved, and understood just how much time in Rome was more than a simple count of days. It was an expression of culture, religiosity, and power. If you enjoyed this trip through time and want more fascinating stories, subscribe to the channel, leave your like and share this video to show everyone how Roman history is full of nuances and secrets. So, ready to explore more curiosities about the Roman Empire? Thank you for joining us up to this point, and see you in the next video.